Welcome back to the Scotti-BYTE channel, and this is Scott. So recently I've had a few of my subscribers ask me about an interesting subject, and that subject is moving or migrating from Proxmox to LXD. So I've entitled this one, Replace Proxmox with LXD. So Proxmox was founded on 15th of April 2008, and it's regarded as a Type 1 hypervisor that supports virtual machines and also Linux containers through the older LXC and not the newer LXD. So the LXD project was started in 2015, and it supports LXD Containers and also LXD Virtual Machines. Proxmox uses LXC Containers, and it uses QEMU for virtual machines. So LXD uses the LXC container infrastructure, and it adds to it by adding a CLI and also an application programming interface. So Proxmox VE is basically an open source version of the commercially available VMware, and it's used LXD containers starting in October of 2015, which was version 4 of Proxmox. So Proxmox is at version 8 now as of this particular video. We are going to look at how to migrate a Proxmox LXC container to a LXD container on a LXD server in this tutorial. So here we are on an instance of Proxmox version 8, and I've created a container called Guacamole, which is simply the Apache Guacamole application. And here it's up and running on my local LAN at the address of 172.16.1.62. And of course, Guacamole uses port 8080, and it operates from a web root called Guacamole. So the application is up and running. It runs just fine. I've configured it and done a few things with it, and it's stable. So back here on Proxmox, you can see that I have a container for Guacamole, and it is container 100, and this application is a LXC container. So the basic difference between LXC and LXD is that there is really no metadata in a LXC container that lets you drive all of the features from the command line. So what we'll be doing is we'll be extracting this LXC container, we'll be adding metadata to it, and we'll be creating an image on the LXD server, and then from that image we'll create a LXD container, and our configuration will be up and running. And just to illustrate with the data and everything, I'll go ahead and type in my username, and I'll type in my password here, and we're able to log in. And I only have one link here, and it just is the link that allows me to log into my Proxmox. If I exit back out and go back home, here we are back at the home screen for this Guacamole instance. So to begin with, I want to go ahead and SSH over to root on the address of my Proxmox server, and I'm going to go ahead and type in my password over there, and we are logged in to my Proxmox root. So the first step I want to do is I want to cd over to this /tmp folder, and there's just a couple of things over there that Proxmox uses as scratch files. So in order to tell what containers we have running, I can do a pct list command. And the pct list command is only showing one container with the ID of 100, and you'll recall from the GUI that our Guacamole container is running at 100, and that's what it says here. and it's the only container running on the system. If I had more LXC containers, we would see a larger list. So to get the actual LXC container out of Proxmox, we're going to do a VZ dump, and I'm saying 100 because that's the ID of that LXC container. I tell it to compress to a gzip, and the dump directory is simply the TMP folder where I'm currently located. Now that the dump has been completed for that file, I can do an ls-al, and you can see here that we have a log file from the dump, and we also have the actual dump file itself, which is what we're interested in. So this is the file that is the LXC container archive of the Guacamole installation. So now we have to create a metadata file, which is a series of YAML commands that are required to build a LXD container. And as I noted earlier, these are not included as a part of a LXC container. So what I'm doing is a pct config 100, and I'm grepping out the architecture and putting it in a file called metadata.yaml. So your architecture of your Proxmox machine must match the architecture of your LXD machine, because you can't import a container with dissimilar architectures, and I just thought I'd go ahead and throw that in. The other issue is that up here you'll notice right here before the PCT and at the very end of the command, we have what looks like an apostrophe, and actually that is a tick mark, which is on the same key as the tilde key on most keyboards. So now we want to go ahead and add a date to that metadata file, and we're doing this with the date command, and the date command brings back the date in the form of seconds, since the Linux epoch date, which is January 1st, 1970 at 0 hours UTC. And finally, you don't really have to do this, but I like to go ahead and include a description, so when I import my image to LXD, it's clear which one it is, and I'm going to do an imported from Proxmox as my description on this image. Now that I've done that, if I go ahead and cat out the file metadata.yaml, you'll see that it has 3 lines. The architecture is AMD 64. We have a creation date, and we have a description which is imported from Proxmox. Our metadata file needs to be a tar file, so we're going to go ahead and issue this tar command to convert the metadata.yaml to a tar file. And now we have a tar file, and we can do an ls-al, and you can see the 2 components that we're going to need over on our LXD system is the tar file for the LXD container. In addition to that, the metadata.tar.gz file as well. In order to copy these files over to my LXD server, I'm using the SCP, or secure copy command. So I have the VZ dump file, I leave a space, and the metadata.tar.gz over to the Scott account at the address of my LXD host, and I'm putting it in a folder called home Scott desktop migrate. So here we go. I'm doing the copy. It moved the metadata file, and it moved the dump of the LXC container image. So now I've logged on to my LXD host, and I'm able to do an ls command, and there are the 2 files, the metadata file and the dump of the LXC container image. So in order to import those, I use a command called LXC image import, and I'm giving it an alias called from Proxmox, and I'm putting the metadata file here, a space, and then the dump file of the LXC image container tar file. When I hit enter, it goes ahead and says transferring image, and it has imported the image. Now that the image has been imported, I can do a LXC image list, and I have a number of other images on this particular LXD server, but you can see here that I have the from Proxmox image, and it is showing up here. Not sure why the description isn't showing up. I kind of expected it to work too, but hey, that's how videos typically work. So now let's look at the containers we have on this system, and if I do a LXC list, I have two LXD VMs and both of them are stopped. So in order to create our guacamole container over here, I'm going to do a LXC launch, and the name of the image is going to be from Proxmox, and then I'm creating a container called test. So now it says creating test, and in a minute it will be up and running. If I now do a LXC list command, we can see that the container is running at the 10.45 address, and you notice that this particular address happens to be a NATed address in LXD, but we really want to offer this container out on the main LAN like we offered the guacamole container from Proxmox. If you watch my LXD step-by-step video and the follow-on video to that, which was LXD configured now what, one of the things that we did was we defined a bridge profile, and so here I'm saying LXC profile assigned to the test container default and the bridge profile, and it has assigned both of those. The reason that we do the default profile is the default profile identifies where the root file system is stored, that is, in which LXD storage pool, and the bridge profile simply offers the container back to the main LAN, as we discussed multiple times on the channel. Now, if we do a LXC list command, we will see that there is no IPv4 address currently, because it realizes that we have changed the profile on the active running container. And if we just wait a few moments and then perform another LXC list command, you should now see an address on the main LAN. And sure enough, there it is, 172.16.1.67. So one of the things that's noteworthy at this point is that Proxmox LXC containers have no such thing as LXD profiles because they're LXC. So settings like storage, which storage pool something is in, or settings like which network or VLAN you're connected to will not carry over in the migrated container, and that's why we did the LXC profile assign command when we imported our container to make it offered on the main LAN. So once again, we did not stop the Proxmox container. If I repaint it here, it's still up and running. The difference between this and the new one is that we can go ahead and paste this in here, and we can set this to address 67, which is what we noticed that the new container on LXD has. When we hit enter there, it goes ahead and gives us a prompt. If I type in my username and I type in my password, sure enough, here we are up and running, and we have the same exact connections over here. So this one is the LXD container running in LXD. This is the Proxmox container, which is a LXC container. I cover LXDware LXD dashboard on the channel frequently, and here's the view of the test container that we just imported from LXDware LXD dashboard. Again, you can see that the IP address is 172.16.1.67. Now, this particular application is not a Docker application. It is installed directly into the LXD container. So just like other settings didn't migrate over, you may want to go to the config section once you import your container. And if you happen to have a LXD container that required Docker, you may want to go up here and edit this, move over to security, and go down to nesting and set security.nesting equals to true, and go down and click OK. Otherwise, your nested Docker applications might not work directly. So realize that you can do these commands through the CLI, but I'm just showing how simple it is to do them from the GUI that LXDware LXD dashboard offers. And again, watch my video on LXD dashboard for details on how to install and configure it. So now that we have a container that has been created from the image that we migrated over from Proxmox, I do a LXC image list, and you can see that the image is still out here, and there's really no reason for us to keep that around. So you can go out and do a LXC image delete from Proxmox, and then when we go do the listing again, you'll see that that image is gone. And that does not affect the up and running container, but if you do several migrations, there's no real reason to keep these images on your LXD system. So in summary, Proxmox is based on Debian, but it's installed as a dedicated appliance from an ISO file. Proxmox, similar to VMware, is designed to be controlled via an integrated GUI. Proxmox adds storage and network management to their virtualization product. And LXD Dashboard is a GUI for LXD that I've covered multiple times on the channel before. I've also covered another project called LXD Mosaic, which is another GUI for LXD. And LXD offers containers, virtual machines, networking, and storage management just like Proxmox. LXD simplifies container management and is more accessible since it is not an appliance. Anyway, that's it for today. Please subscribe and like to the channel, and we'll see you next time.